So we wanted to make a video to show everybody who signed up for our workshops on the equipment we use and how to set it up and why we use the equipment that we do use. So we have everything here that is part of our normal nightly setup. Basically our tripod, the Star Adventure, which is the tracking mount we use, the wedge for the Star Adventure. This is a panoramic rotating base, since my tripod and Bry's tripod doesn't allow rotation along the base. And we use this guy to make adjusting the wedge a lot easier when we're out at night. From there we have the declination bracket, and this is going to look a little bit different because what we've done is we've removed this portion of the bracket, so all we're left with is just the plate. And that'll make sense in a little bit why we did that. And then we have a three-way panoramic head. So this allows rotation in this direction, rotation in this direction, and then rotation again in this direction. And this one was a little bit more expensive than what we usually use. We've had a number of iterations for making our setup, but we settled on this because it gave us the most flexibility for doing our longer focal length panoramas. And then this is a Z bracket, so this goes up and down here, up and down here, and then you'll see later on we'll put our camera there on the side. And then of course the counterweight bar, counterweight. We have a laser pointer, and then the camera, we use dummy batteries for our camera. And then a battery pack, which we use to power the Star Adventure and our dummy batteries. Oh yeah, and I don't have it with me, but intervalometer. This is the remote for Bry's, and that's something everybody should have when they're doing this stuff. Okay, so in terms of setup, I'll just run how we quickly put this together, and then later on when it gets dark, we'll actually set it up on our deck here and do the polar alignment, and everything will make a lot more sense. So we start with the panorama base. That goes there, and then we take the wedge, take the Star Adventure, take our declination bracket, and it's important to note the way we set it up. So the declination bracket only allows this bar to go on one side, and so I usually put the bar on after the fact, but I'll do it just so you can see. So that goes that. Now this is where we use our three-way panoramic head. And then we take our Z bracket. Now after you have the head on, and assuming we're set up where we need to be set up, this is where this comes into play. So you loosen it, and basically what we use this panoramic head for is to create a level platform for which we can set our camera on. And then having a level platform means it's a lot easier to make the panoramas that we make. then put the Z bracket. And then finally, the camera. So we both use L brackets that allow us to shoot both in portrait and landscape. When we're doing the big arch panoramas, generally we shoot mostly that in portrait because it's a lot easier to do one row when it's in portrait mode. If you do it in landscape mode, you'll probably have to do 2 rows or more. And then later in the year, we'll adjust either portrait or landscape depending on how we're framing the Milky Way. So for now, I'll just put it in landscape mode. My setup is so light, and Bry's setup is pretty light as well. We actually don't even use the counterweight a lot of the time. Usually the bar is enough weight if you have this set up close to the center of the RA axis. So at this point, you just plug in your battery. And then we use dummy batteries, so we plug that in. And for the most part, we're ready to go. So you're wondering why we use this instead of this platform. And as I mentioned, the 3-way panorama head allows you to create a level platform. So now when I go to make panoramas, all I have to do is adjust this back if I want to get more sky, or adjust the Z bracket in the other direction. Here, I'll rotate it around. So the Z bracket, I can loosen this one, lift it back so you can get more sky, or drop it down if you want to get more foreground. When you're doing your foreground exposures, you loosen the other way, and now you're aimed downwards and you get more of the foreground in your frame. Here comes the assistant. Hi. Okay, so you have all your equipment set up. We'll go through this later. But basically, we use the laser pointer, and you'll have your tripod set up so it's easy to see where the North Star is. We take our laser pointer, and all we do is hold the laser pointer up to the polar scope of the tracking mount, and then obviously turn the laser pointer on. And then once we have that, all I have to do using one hand is adjust the mount in that orientation and this orientation to get the laser on Polaris. So if you're shooting a wide angle lens up to, say, 85 millimeters, polar alignment isn't that critical. Especially if you're shooting in the 14 to 35 millimeter range. We don't even look through our polar scope anymore. We just use the laser pointer, get the laser on Polaris, and then that's good enough. All right, so at this point, you've arrived to wherever you're going to take your pictures, and you have your tripod set up. We have the interval or the Star Adventure set up. Battery pack is plugged in. We have our declination bracket and the counterweight bar. In this case, I'm not going to use the counterweight because the setup's light enough that it doesn't need to. And then we've assembled our panorama head, the Z bracket, and we have our camera ready to go with our intervalometer. So the hardest part that most people seem to struggle with is how to do a polar alignment with their mount. And using this setup with the declination bracket and this panorama head platform means you can still do a polar alignment with everything mounted on the tracking mount. If you're using a wide angle lens up to like 50 millimeters or even 85 millimeters, polar alignment is much less critical than people tend to make it out to be. We use a laser pointer, which is here. And basically what we do is, with everything assembled and ready to go, You take the laser pointer, and here it's kind of hard to see on the mount, but this is the polar scope, and so it's going to go through the mount. You take your laser pointer, hold it up to that polar scope. At this point, you'll want to have the mount generally facing north. And once you've identified Polaris, we loosen our rotating platform at the wedge, and then adjust the knobs. Looks like my laser pointer's dying, until the laser is on Polaris. This part will take some practice, but it's really not that difficult. Once you have Polaris on the laser pointer, turn the laser pointer off, and if you're curious, now is the time to look through your polar scope and to see both the reticule and where Polaris and what it looks like. Sometimes in darker locations, it's hard to see Polaris among all the stars. Where we're at, there's enough light pollution that Polaris stands out pretty well against the background. But once you have it polar aligned, and this is a good thing to practice at home, before you even go out and take actual pictures, then you want to make sure the mount's on, ready to go. You can adjust your camera settings, and then take some practice exposures and see what your pictures look like. And that's about it.